Cool. Okay, no topic today, so if anyone has questions, feel free to post them down below. I'm reading your comments on another screen, so I'll be able to read, and I don't have my glasses on today. So I guess what is going on in terms of other things. So I've been working on a new method of preserving ascorbic acid in solution, so in water. So some of you may know that it breaks down quite quickly when you put it in water. Depending on the temperature, it can start turning color as soon as one day, really. But usually in products, you'll see it start turning around the 1 month mark. It'll start going yellow, and then deeper yellow, eventually orange. So I had really good packaging, and I still do. I'm still using that packaging. So that package works really well if you don't thicken the product. Essentially, when I was thickening it into a gel, it would actually just entrap air and pour into the bottle with it. So hey, peeping Tom, Rainian. So I was working on ways to sort of make a gel that didn't have oxygen or air in it, but that was pretty difficult. So I was like, maybe there's other ways that I can do it. Maybe by combining it with other antioxidants. So vitamin E, ferulic acid is a really popular combination. But I was looking at some other ones that A, weren't covered in patent, and B, worked better. And I think I've stumbled on something. So it's been stable. It's been stable for almost 2 weeks now at 40 degrees Celsius, which is quite high. So one of the ways that you can predict a product's lifespan is by heating it up and holding it at a higher temperature, and then using that to predict. Sorry, it looks like I'm frozen. Maybe I'm not. Okay. Using that higher temperature to predict a longer period of time. So, for example, if you hold something at 40 degrees Celsius for a month, that's usually equivalent to about a year. Depends on who you ask. Again, this isn't time travel. It's an estimate, but it is one way to accelerate the testing. Otherwise, you are just sitting there with it on a shelf for a year. And that is one way to test it, which is why sometimes making products does take a long time. But in certain cases, you can speed it up by heat. Now, as Peeping Tom mentions, 40 degrees Celsius is quite hot. It's pretty warm to the touch. And the thing about chemical reactions and even physical changes is that some of them are sped up or only occur at certain temperatures. So, for example, if you heat up vitamin C as ascorbic acid to like 45, 50 degrees and above, a second pathway of breakdown starts occurring. Because of that, if I were to hold the product at like 45 degrees or 50 degrees, I might be able to predict it in a shorter period, but it wouldn't actually be relevant to what would occur in real life. So really the best way to test products is at room temperature, but obviously when you're looking at product development, a year testing phase isn't always feasible. So what a lot of companies do is they'll do an accelerated testing within a month or two, and then while it's on the market, they'll do extended testing. Does anyone have any questions? I'm noticing no one's really posting any questions, so I don't know if I can talk for an hour about nothing. Just a lot of thumbs ups. So I'm going to New York on Monday. I'm pretty excited about that. It's been a while since I've been back. I think last time I was back was December or January, right during the snowstorm. So I love New York. I really like being there. It's really it feels really nice to be in a city that sort of like matches your personality or just makes you happy day to day. But this trip, or at least my last trip, was a little bit. I think it was the first time I kind of didn't like New York, and the reason being was that like it was super super cold. Um, so the thing about Toronto is that it can be really really cold, and I can just like stay at home and work and like not feel like I need to go out. Whereas in New York, when it's really really cold, there's still stuff to do, so you kind of have to just suffer with it and leave the apartment or whatever. So for me, it was frustrating because I couldn't just sleep through the bad weather. So a friend got us tickets to the Stephen Colbert show, which was like really cool to see. But we had to wait outside in the snowstorm for like 20 minutes to get in, which apparently isn't that bad, but I didn't dress properly, so it sucked. So that kind of like dampened my whole like New York thing a little bit. So, but I'm happy to be going back. I'm only going back for 3 days. I'm meeting my packaging supplier. I'm also going to meet up with Leah, Dr. Levin, Renee, Gothamista, and some other people. So that'll be fun. Peeping Palm asks, how was my day? My day was all right. I did a lot of cleaning today. So every month I'll sanitize the lab. So today was that day. So a lot of bleach, a lot of scrubbing. Frustrating, but very important thing to do. Keeping your facilities clean. But it's not my favorite day. I think really the first person that I hire will be a dishwasher, because it's either that or I'll just buy like a ton of equipment so I don't have to clean it as often, because that's probably the thing that I hate the most. What did I have for lunch? I had potato stew with some eggs. Yeah, I think that was it. It's raining outside, so you might hear some static or something, but that's rain. Sorry. When are we getting coffee? I would love to get coffee with you, Amy. So I'm in New York Monday to Friday. So if you're around then, let me know. My schedule's kind of all over the place right now, but I'm sure we can figure something out. Ina Hart says, vitamin C day and night. I've read that it works in a different way during the day and night, but I find it difficult to incorporate it in my nightly routine. So I guess what you mean is that if you're using ascorbic acid or vitamin C during the day, I guess it's predominantly its antioxidant effect. So one of the things that ascorbic acid has been studied and found to be very effective at is reducing erythema, which is sunburn. Now, you shouldn't be relying on that primarily. You should definitely be using sunscreen. So your ascorbic acids can sort of be like a supplement. The other thing that ascorbic acid does really well, if it penetrates the skin and all this stuff, is that it can reduce hyperpigmentation. So that can be like age spots, colloquially acne scarring, or post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. It can be useful for melasma. And it can also increase collagen production in the skin. Now, the collagen production only sort of comes into effect if your skin is already photo damaged, at least with a few studies where they looked at vitamin C on like younger undamaged skin and older photo damaged skin. The increase in collagen production was only seen in the older group. So you can definitely use it both times, 2 times during the, 2 times, once in the morning, once in the evening. I think if you're using like a high concentration of ascorbic acid and a sunscreen, I think using it once in the morning is probably the best way to use it. Ascorbic acid is acidic, and in some cases that can cause problems with other products, the extent of which we don't necessarily know. But if you had to choose one, I would say use it in the morning under a sunscreen. And again, at least from one study, it's been shown that there's like a reservoir effect with vitamin C. So it reaches like a limit essentially, and then over time, if you're not reapplying it, it still lasts in the skin. So even if you're using it like every other day, maybe even every other 2 days. As long as you're consistent, your ascorbic acid levels in the skin will be higher than they are naturally. So it's not one of those ingredients you need to use every day. I think it's probably best to use it every day, but don't feel guilty if you miss a day or two. It's not the end of the world, and it's still in your skin at higher levels. Hey, Skinsta guy. I think I'm going to be coming to London sometime soon. I've got a couple friends there who have been nice enough to offer their place, like a place to crash. So I did go last year, and London was really fun. I liked it. But I definitely want to go back and visit. I'd love to meet up with you and some other UK people in the beauty community. My trip in London was pretty quick, and I remember I went into it was one of the fancy like men's shops on like Bond Street, I think. Not Lord and Taylor, but like I don't know, something really fancy. And like I thought it was the department store that sold cookies. So I went into this like really expensive men's clothing shop and asked the clerk like where the cookies were. And he did the very British thing of completely destroying my soul by not saying anything. So I left very quietly. Store-bought serotonin is fine. Asks, is windburn an actual thing? How does it affect skin? Yeah, so certainly windburn can be a thing. If your skin gets very cold, harsh winds can physically, abrade the skin if there's like snow being blown on your face or sand or that sort of thing. The other thing is that your skin is generally not very permeable, but there is some permeation. Like we do lose water and that sort of thing. So the environment and extreme environments can certainly affect that. The old traditional thing of like Vaseline, which is just a physical barrier, can be effective against windburn. The other thing is, I think a lot of times when you're looking at like skiing or outdoor sports, it's difficult to separate the redness that might be caused from cold and wind and those caused by UV. Something that I think a lot of people, not us, but like other people, just because the skin doesn't feel hot, they assume that there's no photo damage from UV. So, in some cases, you might actually be getting more UV than in the summer, just because that light reflects off the snow and bounces back onto your face. So, make sure you're using a sunscreen. A moisturizing formula anyway should be able to help with some of the physical drying effects. Sunscreens do act as moisturizers, even if they're not marketed as so. Vernal3 says, apparently it's going to be cold again on Monday. Yeah, I think it snowed a bit yesterday here in Toronto, and today it's like 3 degrees, so, I mean, it'd be nice if spring would decide to come, but it hasn't. Amy Laura Goldman asks, can salicylic acid or glycolic acid in a cleanser still be effective? And the answer is yes. So I guess it depends on what your goals are. If you're using it as an exfoliant, I would say that a leave-on is probably better and going to be more effective. But again, if you're very sensitive or short on time, then certainly, it's better than nothing. One thing to keep in mind is that the physical action of just rubbing your fingers or water moving over the skin will remove some dead skin cells anyways. So that's something to keep in mind. In terms of let's say for acne, there was one study that I was looking at recently that looked at the effect of glycolic acid in a face wash for acne, and they did find a benefit. The way that they titled and described their experiment was that it was like a low pH cleanser. So for example, if you were to use a cleanser that was low pH, not because of... Sorry guys, I'm getting a bad connection, which is a little bit weird. But if your cleanser is low pH because of citric acid or maybe some other things, would you still be gaining a benefit? Unfortunately, they didn't look at this in the paper, but I would probably guess that it's similar. In terms of salicylic acid, I don't know. I know there's a couple people who claim that like it can work instantly, this and that. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is true. I just personally haven't seen any studies that have claimed that. Um, a lot of people say like salicylic acid is lipophilic or oil soluble. And the thing is, if you work with salicylic acid, you'll realize that it isn't very lipophilic. I think something people forget is that lipophilic is not analog. It's not that it's lipophilic or it's not. Things can be lipophilic to a degree. So, for example, salicylic acid is actually water soluble to a degree. That degree is about 2 grams, I think, per liter. It works out to about like 0.2% is about how much salicylic acid you can dissolve into water, sorry. So, I mean, you could probably make the claim that salicylic acid is water soluble depending on how you set your cutoff. It is much more easy to dissolve salicylic acid in oil, but it's not infinitely dissolvable. It's dissolvable up to a degree. So whether or not, for example, salicylic acid can even penetrate through comedones and that sort of thing, I haven't necessarily seen studies that have shown that. Based on the chemical structure and its solubility, it's probably likely, but it's one of those things that hasn't necessarily been proven. So I mean, there are studies that have compared salicylic acid and glycolic acid, or an AHA, which is often referred as water soluble, for closed comedones, which are usually like blackheads, whiteheads, that sort of thing, clogged pores, and they were equally effective over time. So yeah, like, do you need salicylic acid specifically for blackheads? Maybe not. Glycolic acid may actually just work just as well. JYC Ing asks, what's your skin regime like? So in the mornings, I'll usually use a micellar water or like a cleansing water just to remove the products from the evening before and like whatever gunk has gotten onto my face in the night. I'll then rinse that off and then usually step into the shower at this point. And then I will use a sunscreen. But before the sunscreen, depending on what I'm testing, I'll usually use a couple, toners or first essences or gels, essentially is what you call them. So right now I'm testing a vitamin C and a couple different plant extracts, plant antioxidants. So that's what I'm using before my sunscreen. And then the sunscreen I'm using is the Bioderma Photoderm SPF 50. So yeah. And then throughout the day, I reapply lip balm with SPF. In the evenings, I'll usually wash with like a foaming soap. My skin's generally pretty resilient. So to be honest, like I cycle between 3 or 4 different cleansers, whatever's just closest. I don't really notice any different effects between them. After that, I'll usually apply whatever I'm testing. So right now it's a gel moisturizer with linoleic acid. And then depending on how dry my skin is, sometimes I'll put like a balm around my eyes or lips. And then some evenings, if I remember, I'll use a retinoid as well. So it's pretty simple, I think. Sorobot Serotonin is fine asks, is vitamin C an exfoliant? So it is an acid, so it will lower the pH of the skin. In some cases, that can increase desquamation, but it's not traditionally considered an exfoliant. There are some differences in the chemical structure compared to AHAs, BHAs, and that sort of thing. But because like gluconolactone or PHAs are also effective at exfoliating, I would probably consider it an exfoliator as well. I know it's not often marketed that way, but just based on the chemical structure, it seems likely that it is. I haven't come across any papers, for example, that show that it increases desquamation, so I can't say for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised, and it seems very likely that it would be. Aloe and Glow asks, what ingredients are never good for skin that you see in products? Are SLS and SLES always to be avoided? No. So the overall formulation matters much more than the presence of one ingredient. And that goes for pretty much all formulations. SLES, so sodium lauryl sulfate and sodium lauryl ethoxylated sulfate, LAUREF, that's what it's shortened into. Those are generally considered pretty harsh surfactants. On their own, they're actually used to test irritation of the skin. But again, you can formulate it with other surfactants, moisturizers, proteins, amino acids, polymers, all this stuff, to actually have a very gentle skin product. So just because it's on the ingredient list doesn't mean it's the same as applying it neat or at a high concentration on the skin. So I know, like, the first thing that like an educated skincare consumer does is like look at the ingredient list and start deciphering it. But as a formulator, I will tell you that it's actually not that useful. For example, if you were to give me the ingredient list of a product and not show me the product or allow me to use it, I would have a very difficult time figuring out how to recreate that product because it doesn't tell you anything about concentration. So, a lot of times you'll get advice like the top 6 ingredients are at like 40% or whatever, but really there is absolutely no way to know. There are places where you can like estimate, but again, each formulation is different. So for example, a product that is 90% water, 5% compound A, 5% compound B would be listed the same as 40% water, 30% compound A, 30% compound B. They're still arranged in order of concentration, but their concentration can vary quite a bit. So yeah, I think obviously the ingredient list is useful. But you can't. It's hard to make as strong claims as some people do based on it. So yeah, I think it's more useful for finding out if there's something that you might be sensitive to or allergic to. But like when you're predicting the effect of it, I don't think the Inky is as good as people may think. And also the other thing is like an Inky doesn't describe function. So for example, stearic acid can be used to thicken creams. It can also in some cases be used as a co-emulsifier or a moisturizer. In some products, it's actually used as an encapsulation ingredient. So it's used to encapsulate an active ingredient and protect it from the environment. And then when it gets on your skin, it melts and delivers that active ingredient to your skin. And again, on the Inky, it would show up just as stearic acid. So there's no way to know. There really is no way to know. FoxyLove.de asks, what is the best sunscreen for acne-prone skin? I think that's a hard one to answer because everyone's skin is quite specific, and it's really difficult to decide whether or not something is an acne trigger. I think the best thing you can do is keep a diary. It's quite easy now to just snap a photo. So just take photos of your skin, maybe at around the same time every day and in kind of the same lighting conditions. And then when you introduce a new product, you can put a tag or a note on that photo. And that might give you a better idea if a product is breaking you out or not. Because again, like I'm going to recommend the Bioderma SPF 50. It does contain lipids in it in the form of dicappyl carbonate. It's not a triglyceride, so it doesn't necessarily act as a food source for acne bacteria. But yeah, I mean, comedogenicidity or like acneogenicity are kind of marketing terms at this point. They're often